You're listening to Rogue Table Talks. Here's Mike.
All right, we are back. Rogue Table Talks 110. This might be a little bit shorter version. We've got a little schedule stuff to work through, but it'll be action packed. It'll be loaded with quality, whatever quality podcasting, quality.
Yes. I don't know, information.
What is it?
Quality
What
stuff.
is it that we offer?
This is good. I just heard a collective sigh when we said it'd be shorter.
Right.
They were like,
it might be a little shorter. Woo.
Really? Like,
Yeah, I can get on with my day. Yes, Rogue Table Talks number 110. And we are talking about sacrifice in the big story. Before we jump into that, I just remind you to subscribe wherever, and we have roguetabletalks.com, which is a connection point, and our YouTube channel as well. And we'd love to hear from you. So you can email us at rtt@roguetabletalks.com, and we'll probably read it. And I can't promise anything beyond that, to be honest. I get so many emails. But no, we'd love to actually hear from you, and we definitely would reply. And it's not like we get a lot of them. So let's jump in. And before we jump in and talk about stories and movies, I kind of want to make an obvious point of the role of sacrifice in the big story that we're in. And it's all over, and not even, Old Testament sacrifices. I don't necessarily even mean that, although I don't think we understand. We might spend a minute on that. I don't think we understand the sacrifice involved in a farmer giving up, a sheep for worship purposes. I mean, it'd be like, us donating a new car or something, maybe. Depending on our finances, but and then of course the sacrifice of Christ, that all of that pointed to in John 15, starting in verse 12. Jesus is in the upper room with his disciples, and he says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you." So there's this command to love. And so in between the two sentences that basically talk about we are to love, you're my friends if you do what I command you, and the command is to love, is this sacrificial element that tells us what this love is going to be like. That it's going to be sacrificial. It's going to cost something. And so as we're making that somewhat obvious biblical point. Why do you think that is so? Do we understand that to be the case? Is that our experience? And are we surprised at the sacrifice required for love? Yeah, that's a lot of stuff I'm just throwing out there. Like, respond to.
Pick one. It's a buffet of questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I'm reading about sacrifice right now from a little bit of different perspective, but the author is talking about sacrifice is foregoing pleasure in the present to provide something in the future, and that's what work is essentially. Is you're going to work, you're sacrificing immediate gratifications for things you could do to alleviate suffering. But you're doing so in order to provide something that you value, food for the family, stability, experiences for your children, something like that. And this is the basic definition of sacrifice. So when you say, hey, the farmer is putting a lamb on the altar, they're in a deeply religious sense. What sacrifice isn't a guarantee of certainty, which it was for the pagan gods around Israel, was you sacrifice in order to ensure the rains would come and the sun would shine, and you wouldn't be overtaken by enemies. But that's not what the sacrificial system means in the Old Testament pointing to the New. It was a sacrifice, and it was trust. It was trust. I'll sacrifice something in the present and trust that
Hmm.
that God in the future will provide. So we all do sacrifice in some way, but then when you think about, well, what is the greatest sacrifice? What is the most significant value that I have that I could offer to show love or to provide, or what how would that communicate that? And so this is why the Christian story is so unique, because you have, in a sense, the father sacrificing the son. So Abraham and Isaac, only the knife isn't stayed, and the son sacrificing his own life. You
Hmm.
just don't find that in other
Right.
narratives. This ultimate archetypal sacrifice of giving up a child and then laying down your life, both of them working in tandem together. So here, when Jesus says, laying down your life uh, is one of the archetypal ultimate sacrifices to show
Hmm.
love for people.
Hmm.
I don't think it's a light. I mean, this sounds so nice. You could put it over your door frame of
Greater
your house.
love hath, yeah,
Yeah,
greater
but it's
love
not
hath no man.
nice.
Right.
It's not easy, and
Right.
it's there's an abyss here to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I do think there's a cultural understanding or pre-understanding that if you love someone, everything's easy.
Hmm.
If you love someone, then nothing's hard. Everything's a joy. Even doing stuff for them, you do it, because you love them. And so it all feels good and wonderful and you're happy to do it. And, this is,
It's just
I
so naive, but go
it's so
ahead.
self-serving. It's so self-serving and naive that almost the opposite is true.
Yeah.
What Jesus says here, but in what's true throughout the biblical story is the way you demonstrate love for someone is by demonstrating some costly action on their behalf for their sake, and not for anything you're going to get out of it. Because
Hmm.
you love them, you will do. I mean, there's literally nothing you gain from laying down your life for someone because you're laying down your life. You're not doing it for anything to get in return. I just think in our culture, it's so self-serving so often, that we that love is good, love is happy. So therefore, if I'm loving, I should be happy and joyful. Then sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it's hard and it's painful. And I think one of the things about this series is that we can talk about that in the terms of stories, because I think that's maybe that's easy or hard to see propositionally when I just say it, but if you see it in a story, then you maybe begin to understand. And there's lots of obvious examples, of course, in movies. Harry Potter's parents, right? I
Hmm.
mean, they sacrifice. They step in front of Voldemort's, thunderbolt or whatever, uh, and give up their life in some way. Spoiler alert if you didn't know that.
Yeah, you shame on you if you're not
it's
up
like
on the Harry
it's like
Potter series.
it's like the first thing that happens.
Yeah, the boy who lived, I think, is the very
Yeah,
first chapter.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then he
Um,
goes, he follows that though, because he realizes in order to actually vanquish evil, you can't attack it with violence. And so the spell, this is another spoiler alert. If you haven't finished the movies or book seven, pause it and skip over this. But
mhm,
uh, he refuses to cast a spell that will, uh, do violence to Voldemort in the end. He
mhm,
realizes that it's only going to be through his self-sacrifice that he has to lay his life down to truly vanquish evil. Not Tolkien, but Rowling has a Christian faith and background, and so
mhm.
there's two Bible verses in Book Seven, and I don't think laying down your life for your friends is one of them, to my knowledge, but that's what Harry does.
Right,
I
right.
know I have to lay down my life.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's it's all over the place in that story. It's you said Tolkien, but obviously, um, Sam gives up much to be loyal to his friend, and a more I mean, there's the Dark Knight, right? Or he takes the blame, or he's willing to sort of take the blame to be the hero. That, how does it go? The hero we deserve but don't, or love but don't deserve, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea is that Batman takes the fall so that Harvey Dent can remain, unblemished in his reputation, and so that the city can believe in him as a do-gooder, and he died as a good person. And so there's this level of, that Batman so loves Gotham and so, acts in Gotham's behalf that he's willing to be blamed as the bad person, the Dark Knight, so that the memory of Harvey Dent can be whatever. And right, I mean, it's that sort of thing where he's acting on behalf of, out of love, not out of some emotional feeling of love, but out of some action that will preserve the city, and he bears the brunt.
Well, that's, hey, lay down your life for your friends sounds really nice. Okay, but how about reputational suicide? Like, nobody
Right.
wants to do that.
Right.
No, I'm
He
gonna go
goes from
clear my name.
Yeah, he's going to go from hero to villain,
Yeah.
for the sake of others. And there's all sorts of, obviously, one of the examples I like is an older movie is Bruce Willis and Armageddon. Ben Affleck, I think it's Liv Tyler,
Yeah.
Bruce Willis. It's sort of a silly, absurd movie, and so on a lot of levels. But at the end, Bruce Willis basically dies blowing up this asteroid to stave off Armageddon, and it's a very sort of Christ figure sort of thing, where the shots of people around the world cheering as the asteroid blows up. And that's obviously, that's a secular movie. Obviously, this is this is not trying to echo the big story, but because we're image bearers, we can't help, when we say something true, we can't help but echo the big story in some way. And that's why we see it so often in stories all the time.
Well, you said
Right.
had something in your very first notes, I think, in these stories, that some of them have, the authors or the directors, producers have Christian faith or Catholic faith background or whatever, but a lot of them don't, and yet they tell a story that's very true. And to me, the most, that's why they're good. That's why we like them. That's why we resonate with them. It's because they tell a very true story. And you said something in your notes, is like, all truth is God's truth. What other kind is there?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to remember that when we're listening to music, that is it doesn't have to be Christian to tell the truth.
Right. Yeah, I think that it can. Yeah, anytime somebody says anything true, that they're doing something God is the source of that truth. God is the source of what's real. Like, we're living in His big story. To say something true is to say something true about His big story. And I think at a deeper level, the only reason we are able to notice what's true is because God made us, in His image. We can love dogs, but dogs can't say something true about the big story. And so whoever, Christopher Nolan making The Dark Knight, he's not trying to echo anything, but he's saying something true about the universe, which is what art is. And in doing so, he's describing the story that we're in some way that we can see and we can relate to. And I do think, okay, that's easy to see in some sense, I think. And that's obviously, we think of Christ, we think of sacrifice. We think of sacrificial stories. You think of some once for all sort of, those are all throughout movies too, like in Inside Out. Isn't his Bing Bong or whatever? Bing Bong, sacrifices himself to the memory hole so that Joy can escape. And I think Wally, doesn't he? Wally, like, he holds the lid open and gets crushed or something. That's normally the kind of things we see, but I do think there's also another kind of, like Lady Bird. Did you see Lady Bird?
Yeah, it was a while ago. I kind of
Yeah.
forgot. Yeah.
So the mom in Lady Bird is a very imperfect character. Yeah, it's not like she's not the paragon of wonderfulness, but she loves her daughter and she genuinely sacrifices for her in sort of an everyday sort of way that is also true and also part of, like, every parent can sort of relate to that. And I think it's that kind of sacrifice that also fits in with the big story. Um, and that kind of goes more with, Romans 12:1, where we're living sacrifices. And I think the idea in that verse is we sort of crawl up onto the altar every day. If you want to follow me, Jesus says, deny yourself, but take up your cross and follow. That there's a sort of daily denial of self so that we can be loving, so that we can love others, so that we can be Christ-like. And I think those sorts of sacrificial stories are a little more to that point where, it's not like, I wonder, would I die for so-and-so? And what we really need to do is empty the dishwasher without a bad attitude.
No,
you know?
no. I would much rather someone with a gun come in and say, "Would you die for this person?" Well, that's easy because it's not going to happen.
That's right. That's right. It's a hypothetical, and we can say, yes, I would lay down my life. But, I'm going to wait till you empty the it's this sort of, will I do something actually tangibly in denial of self, even in small everyday ways, over and over again? Because that's what love is, Um, and I think there's this sort of everyday quality of love that I'm either loving today or not loving today in some tangible way that doesn't have a ton to do with emotions. I think emotions maybe tend to follow it, but it has a lot to do with, will I make the bed? Um, will I have a conversation with someone that they want to have and I don't really? Well, whatever it might be, all the things that we find everyday excuses not to do, um, that's really the sacrifice that we're called to on a regular. I mean, we may one day be called to die in the arena, but most Christians are not.
Yeah.
But we are called to everyday sort of sacrifices that show love for other people. That in some ways, because they're everyday, they're really easy to say no to. Like, it seems like the stakes are low, so right? We just slide on past.
Well, I think in the morning when you wake up, one of the thoughts should be, what can I do in a very real, small, tangible way to bring order out of chaos, to uh, alleviate someone's suffering or loneliness, or to encourage someone. Like, what's something really small? Like, how can I make even my life? How can I make my life one small step better today? And then how can I make those around me like one small? Like, what can I do? Even if it's okay, I've been putting off the yard for 2 weeks and it's chaotic and it's driving everyone nuts. So you bring order out of chaos,
Mm-hmm.
or something your spouse has asked you to do for months and it's bringing order out of chaos, or you're going to write a letter of encouragement to somebody just to notice them. Just one small concrete thing to do, because people are complex and deep, and life is suffering, and we know this. So what is something you can just and make it a small goal, and you start to build momentum around that, and then you're starting to live into this verse. You're starting to actually lay down time and energy and effort for people around you.
Yeah, and I think that's where spiritual growth happens. That's going to require, some rhythm of becoming, more influenced by the Spirit. So you have love, you have joy, you have peace, you have patience. Because that might be a loving thing, is to have patience with somebody who really doesn't deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
But, because, because the Holy Spirit has been moving and making me a more patient person, I can love them by being patient with them. And I think it's this sort of everyday rhythm of sacrifice that really shows us to be loving or not. Because you go back to, that's why Jesus can command it. This is the command I have to you. You need to love one another. And it's, that you're my friends if you do what I command you to do. I just commanded you to love one another. You're my friends if you love one another. And then in the middle of those two sentences are, you're going to have to lay your life down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's that, and part of it is I'm laying my life down. I'm demonstrating my love for you, but also it's going to cost you something. It's not like, well, I would love that person, but ... There'll always be that. There'll always be the real good reason, not a bad reason, but a real good reason why this is a bad deal for me to be loving for that person. And, right? And that's what
Well,
Jesus said. Yeah, that's the point.
that's the point. Back to your living sacrifice, like the altar's on fire.
Yeah, it's
There's a
not a
real good reason not to go get on the altar.
it's not a Sealy Posturpedic altar.
There's a lot of good reasons to stay off the altar.
Right. Right. Yeah. And so that's the thing. And the whole point is, yes, you don't want to get on the altar. Nobody wants to get on the altar. That's why it takes love. And you need to become a loving person, less self-focused, less self-protective, more self-aware, more humble, more others-focused. And in some ways, we see that demonstrated best in story than we do in other ways, in real life stories. We see how that plays out, and that's really going to cost something. So, I think there's there's lots of good examples in stories of that demonstrate love. And so I think that's one of the I guess golden parts of story, is that it shows us something that that we don't really want to see, I guess. But that are we see them because it's in the story that I can't really miss. That I kind of understand what it's like to be the Dark Knight in a way. This is kind of silly, but it is. I kind of get it, where I'm willing to take the fall for something, and we've probably all had a little taste of that. For a sibling, for a family member, you take the heat, you take the fall, and that's kind of what being loved. We might not think about that as loving, but then if somebody does that for us, and they take the heat and they take the fall, that's really what love looks like. And we kind of can see a window in it, strangely enough, in a story like The Dark Knight. And I think that's the real story we're in. We emulate those things, but those are the people that they're telling us something true about the universe. And one of the things they're saying is, this is what it means to love somebody, and it's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think once you start looking for these themes of the big story, these biblical themes, and you see them everywhere, and we probably could name lots and lots and lots of them. And I think in lots of the stories, they kind of show it doesn't really require emotional feeling for a particular person. It's not like a romantic, lovey-dovey sort of thing, right? They go in Saving Private Ryan, they might not even like him. But at the end, they pay a heavy price to go get this guy. And yes, they're following orders, but they very easily could have gotten out of it and said, yeah, no, we couldn't find him, or he died, or whatever. And there's some part of that where it's almost more loving. It is more loving that they didn't know him. But it wasn't like they were rescuing their friend. It's just some guy who needed rescuing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that I can sit here and name all sorts of examples because that's such a big part of the big story. Why do you think it's so strange to us to think, or do you think it's strange to us to think that our culture finds it strange that loving somebody is going to be costly?
I don't know. There's two worlds. I think there's the world of people say what they believe, and then there's the world of people act out what they believe. And I think if I have to be, hard-nosed about it, most people, when they say what they believe, it's not true. You just show what's true by the way you act and by the way you live. So nobody cares. I mean, they do what you say, but it may be true, it may not be true. So if I say, I think it's, child abuse that the father sacrificed the son, or I think this is love is not sacrifice, or I think this, but you still do it when you want to show love to somebody. So you actually do believe sacrifice. People actually do believe in order to love somebody. I mean, this happens all the time, unbelievers, believers. In order to maintain a faithful, monogamous marriage, you sacrifice things. That's what the vows are. And forsaking all others is a part of those vows, right?
Right.
And to the best of your ability, you keep those vows, because marriage in some sense is a sacrifice.
Yeah, 100%. And we sort of feel like we have to explain it because sacrifice feels like a bad word to us. Sure. Yeah. And it really isn't. It really isn't a bad word. So it's interesting because I think that works both ways, where we say love, maybe shouldn't require sacrifice, but we sacrifice and our actions belie it. Or we might say, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know I'll have to sacrifice, to love. And then it totally surprises us.
Wow.
Wait a minute. What's this deal? So I think I do think that's where stories can help us. It reminds us of this biblical story, which sometimes we just get wrong and confused or forget. And so that's where I would say, I don't know, homework this week, maybe watch a movie or a story that involves some sort of sacrifice and just reflect on it, and what can I take from this to help me love other people better? So we're going to leave it there, in the interest of time. And we will hit next week. We're going to hit another element of story. So that's what I'd say. Just maybe watch Lady Bird if you haven't seen it, or watch The Dark Knight, or WALL-E, or Inside Out, or Saving Private Ryan, or something, and reflect on that true telling of the true story. With that, grace and peace.
Thanks for listening to Rogue Table Talks. Be sure you're subscribed to our podcast wherever you listen, and on our YouTube channel. Just search Rogue Table Talks.